Welcome to the Lakers Nation podcast. My name is Trevor Lane. You can find this show on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, the CLNS radio app, and of course, LakersNation.com. As always, if you head to iTunes and check out the show, please rate, review, and subscribe. We would certainly appreciate it. Today's show is being brought to you by Harry's Razors. Head to harrys.com/Lakers for $5 off. A phenomenal Father's Day gift for your dad. Check it out, definitely worthwhile. Now on today's show, we are going to be talking to Mark Medina of the Southern California News Group about some comments that Byron Scott made about D'Angelo Russell. We'll also be talking about Lonzo and LaVar Ball, the upcoming NBA draft, and whatever else we can get to. So let's jump right into things. Here we go. Today I've got Mark Medina of the Southern California News Group. Mark, thanks so much for joining the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on, as always.
Hey, so recently you wrote a piece where you had went and spoke to ex-coach Byron Scott, and he had some interesting comments there. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, the thing that was interesting, I know that covering Byron, his 2 years with the Lakers, whether you agreed with him or not, and there were plenty that would disagree with him, he was always honest and held true to his convictions. But I was wondering, now that a year has passed, what has he learned? What does he still stay true to himself? To what degree does he think he could have done things better? Because obviously the record was what it was. And so, on the heels of Byron Scott, he has this new book out and he's trying to promote it. I figured I'd try to get some answers to that. And what I was fascinated with was that he didn't really have any regrets at all. I mean, he still stayed true to his word that he thought that he was justified in benching D'Angelo Russell and Julius Randle 20 games of the season because of the team's losing, the inconsistency, and more importantly in his mind, the fact that he thought that both D'Angelo and Julius didn't have the proper work ethic and attitude needed to keep that starting spot. And, I know obviously there's a lot of Laker fans that disagreed with that, but, Byron still stays true that he thought that it was necessary and that he thought it actually helped the players in the long run with their play later on in the season.
When Byron first came in, when he was first brought on to replace Mike D'Antoni, I remember there was this huge swell of optimism, and people were saying, oh, the Lakers are finally going to be playing defense, and that dissipated rather quickly. And at this point, I don't think that most fans see Byron in a positive light, at least not as the Lakers coach. Of course, they remember him from his days with the Showtime Lakers and everything, but it just felt like Byron Scott and D'Angelo Russell just didn't get along, and ultimately the fans jumped onto the Russell side rather than Coach Byron Scott's side. Do you think that's an accurate assessment of kind of what happened with Scott's tenure?
A little bit. I mean, I know that he was a fan favorite because he was a Laker luminary when they got the hire, but to be honest, I don't think that there was this blazing excitement when he was hired. I think people around the league, when you talk to people with different teams and that sort of thing, they definitely saw him as just this placeholder that would, guide Kobe Bryant the last few seasons. He obviously has a close relationship. And frankly, there are a lot of question marks about what he could do to accelerate the team's development. I think, on the positive end, he's had some different success with rebuilding projects with, the former New Jersey Nets and the New Orleans Hornets when they were the Hornets. But he had come on the heels of, not a lot of success in Cleveland after LeBron James left, and his defensive, resume that he had in those previous 2 stops in New Jersey and New Orleans didn't really carry over to Cleveland. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily a surprise that some of these things didn't pan out. But as far as D'Angelo Russell goes, it doesn't seem like his sentiment has changed. He went so far to say that he's talked to people around the organization that say that his work ethic and attitude hasn't really improved that much. And the thing that's very interesting about D'Angelo, and I think we've discussed this on the podcast, previous episodes, is that on one hand, you have to take into account that he is a young player and he has a lot of skills that, maybe not a lot of people have. But on the other hand, the things that Byron Scott said and still say about D'Angelo, this isn't just Byron Scott blowing smoke. There's frankly a lot of people in the organization that felt the same way about his attitude and work ethic his rookie season. But, to be fair to D'Angelo, there were also people in the organization that thought that Byron beat up on him a little too much and didn't really present, some of those criticisms in the most constructive manner. So, I think what's kind of ironic with that whole framework is there's people around the league that were critical of Byron with his coaching style, how he handled D'Angelo, but in a way it kind of provided cover for him where, I think entering his second season, there was a hope that, now that Byron Scott's not coaching the team, and to a lesser extent now that Kobe Bryant's not on the team, D'Angelo would finally be in a position to succeed and flourish. And as we saw the second season, it didn't really amount to that being, so simple. There's still learning curves because he's a young player, but I think it's also exposed himself to some additional criticism regarding his consistency and, what he can be as a leader.
Sure, and I was just reading your article again when we were preparing for the show, and I was looking at the quotes from it, and the direct quote from Byron Scott says, "I don't know if his work ethic has gotten any better. Some of the people I've talked to in the organization said that it hasn't. I wish him all the best. The maturity will catch up to him sooner or later when he realizes it's an honor and a privilege to be in the NBA and be in the position that he's in." I mean, ouch. That definitely isn't a ringing endorsement of D'Angelo Russell, and we know that they've had problems in the past. But the line that got me, and this would be the line that if I was D'Angelo Russell would kind of dig at me, was the part where he says some people I've talked to in the organization said that it hasn't. Because if it's just Byron Scott saying this, then we can say, oh, it's just sour grapes. They've never had a great relationship. Byron's just kind of still taking shots. But he's saying people that are still in the organization right now are saying that D'Angelo Russell's work ethic isn't great. So if I'm D'Angelo Russell, I'm thinking, who is saying this about me inside of our organization? Now, you're around the team quite a bit. You've been around D'Angelo Russell. How do you see him receiving a quote like this?
Well, I mean, for what it's worth, whenever I asked D'Angelo, at least from my end, about Byron, he was always diplomatic. He, never criticized him publicly. But what was interesting, last year during Summer League, I had been working on a piece about, kind of their summer workouts and how they became known as the Breakfast Club with these early morning sessions. And so I had talked with the previous strength and conditioning coach, Tim DeFrancesco, about all these, the different routines these guys have shown and what he's seen in their development and that sort of thing. And I brought up that specific point to Tim about, how Byron was critical of D'Angelo's work ethic, and I wanted to get his perspective of what he saw his rookie season versus now in his workouts. And Tim had an interesting observation where, he spoke in generalities, but he said, I think a lot of times when people were quote unquote perceiving him of not working hard, a lot of times you could make the case that, this was him getting adjusted to an overwhelmingly new environment. So I think from Tim's perspective, it was, he wasn't necessarily discounting, hey, what Byron is saying is wrong, but he was arguing that a lot of it didn't really have to do with attitude. A lot of it, at least in his specific cases of working with him, had to do with, hey, he's a new guy just trying to, hit the ground running and figure out, what the different routine entails and what it means to be a professional. And so I circle back to D'Angelo about what Tim had said about how he liked his work habits when he was working with him. And I wondered what D'Angelo thought about, the rep that he had gotten, about him not having a bad work ethic. And D'Angelo went so far to say, people who say that don't really matter. So I think that was his indirect way of, kind of chirping to Byron. But, when Byron was saying those quotes, I would say it's a little strong to say that his work ethic hasn't gotten better. I mean, I think that any player is always going to improve, but has it gotten better enough to make the Lakers really gush about him? And I think objectively you could make the case that it hasn't. What's really interesting when you talk to Luke Walton, obviously his coaching style, the way he talks to players, the way he talks about players is much different than how Byron Scott did. But when we talked with him throughout the season, there would be times at different parts of the season when we talk about and ask about D'Angelo's improvement during a certain stretch of games. And Luke would bring up, he's starting to figure out his routine and really getting after it in the gym. And you can't help but read in between the lines to say that that wasn't always the case before. And it would happen at different parts of the season. So the question was, why wasn't this a consistent thing? And, I don't want to psychoanalyze anyone because, I didn't go to school for that. But,
Yeah.
If I'm D'Angelo Russell, maybe because of who it is with Byron, you take it for what it is and their relationship, but it shouldn't necessarily be a surprise. Like the exit interview that he had with Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka, I mean, I think they made it pretty clear that they want him to improve his leadership. They want him to improve his consistency and conditioning, and you can make the case that that all has to do partly with, changing your approach and your work habits and that sort of thing. And, to D'Angelo's credit, he's been pretty honest and self-critical when he's talked to us. He had even admitted after his exit meeting that he didn't feel like he had the respect of the guys, and he wasn't able to, kind of portray himself as a leader, and, he blamed it on himself. So, I think when people are reading this piece about Byron, obviously it's his perspective, and, you could certainly make the case that, Byron could have done things better as a coach and that sort of thing. But specifically, his views on D'Angelo with his attitude and work habits, this isn't a Byron perspective. Like it's reflective of how a lot of people in the organization have felt.
Now, the key decision makers right now, because I mean, Byron Scott obviously doesn't have any power in the Lakers organization at this point, but the key decision makers are Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka, with Jeannie Buss, voicing her opinion in there as well. But as far as basketball operations go, it's Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka. Aside from the exit interview, do you have any sense where they fall on the spectrum? Do they see D'Angelo Russell as having just a super poor work ethic, or do you or do they see it as more of like a, Byron who is being overly critical? Maybe they're somewhere in the middle. Do you have a sense of that?
Super poor is probably strong. I mean, I think that they like D'Angelo's game. They, are very well aware of the fact that he is a very great passer, has some really good court vision, can be a really good scorer, and he's shown all those elements. You can't discount certainly the statistics that show that, he was only the second Laker in franchise history in his sophomore season to post the numbers he did, and the other guy who did that was Magic Johnson. So you certainly can't discount that. But yeah, they would love for him to improve on the things I had already mentioned: his leadership, his conditioning, and his consistency. And in fairness, when we're bringing this up, that's something that they've stressed a lot to all the young guys. But I think there is something to be said that when we talk about, the development of certain players, it's not a coincidence that they bring up guys like Brandon Ingram and Ivica Zubac a lot and rave about their work habits, and they're not as vocal when they say that about D'Angelo. That's not to say that it's super poor. It's not super poor at all. These guys are professional athletes. They play basketball, they work out and train, but it's more of how to get to that next level where you're not just doing what's required. You're going the extra mile, and then when you're going the extra mile, you're also fine-tuning, the exact things that you need to work on, and you're figuring out the exact routine that will maximize your development. And I think, frankly, they found that Brandon Ingram and Ivica Zubac have been more effective specifically in that realm.
Yeah, the other day, Magic Johnson did mention that Brandon Ingram was the only guy that he saw on the roster as being untouchable. And I had to wonder if that might, kind of ruffle the feathers of D'Angelo Russell or Julius Randle or any of these other guys. Hopefully it has the opposite effect and they actually kind of lights a fire under them and they continue to work hard during the offseason and everything. But for now, it does seem like the organization is putting Brandon Ingram ahead of these other young players on the roster, even ahead of D'Angelo Russell, who I think was, I don't know if there's even that much of an argument. I think he was, after the Lou Williams trade, he was probably the Lakers' best player last season, right?
He was at times. I think the thing that that made it hard and to evaluate him is that his growth came in waves. You would see some really good games where he was unstoppable, and then he would kind of turn it the other way around where, his shooting was off, or he had more turnovers than assists, that sort of thing. Where, I think with Brandon, there was never a game where I would say never, but there was rarely a game where he was the best player on the floor. But in a sense, they knew what to expect from him on a night-to-night basis. And believe me, like with Brandon, there's a lot of things he's got to improve. But they felt like there was a base that they could at least lean on with that. But yeah, as far as the untouchable stuff, I mean, I was frankly surprised that Magic would go so strong to say that Brandon's untouchable because, I mean, the hypothetical that you get some trade with a superstar that's too good to pass up, are you really going to say, hey, sorry, we're not going to do that because we want to keep Brandon? Right. Like, maybe that's a little strong. But I think there is something to be said that, his words show that they're really high on his development, and they were in that position, earlier where this wasn't Magic making the decision; it was Mitch Kupchak and Jim Buss. But when they were trying to get DeMarcus Cousins from Sacramento at the time, they made it clear that Brandon Ingram wasn't an option. But with all that being said, you do have to take into account a few things. The fact that they get the number 2 pick, the fact that they are presumably going to use it on Lonzo Ball or, maybe De'Aaron Fox, that gives the Lakers more flexibility and maybe expending someone like D'Angelo. But that being said, I think because of Lonzo Ball's game, the Lakers see that as a pair that complements each other well. And we're talking about, their issues with the things they need to see more from D'Angelo and that sort of thing. It's not to the point where they think, hey, we got to expend him because it's addition by subtraction. At the end of the day, D'Angelo is a really good basketball player, and he's a young player, so it's going to take time. But these are kind of the early returns on what they've seen so far.
Yeah, the Lakers do seem to be on a collision course with Lonzo Ball. I mean, he seems to be the overwhelming favorite to be the second overall pick. I have seen some draft boards that don't have him as the second best player in the draft. Pretty much every draft board I've seen has Markelle Fultz as the number 1 player in the draft, and I can't argue with that. I think he's incredible. But Lonzo Ball does seem to be just destined to end up being a Laker. It feels like that's what's going to happen. And you kind of alluded to it already, but can Lonzo Ball and D'Angelo Russell play side by side? Do you think that's a combination that will work?
Not only do I think it's a combination that will work, I think it's a combination that would put both players in the best position to succeed. I mean, you saw the way the Lakers used D'Angelo Russell last season. They started him off as a point guard and having him run the offense, but they also saw that he's much more than that. Like, he can create his own shot. He has shown at times that he can, nail it from 3 and he can post up. And I think there was a growing sense more and more that they think that D'Angelo is more comfortable playing off the ball than he is with the ball. Now, with that being said, that opened up some complications of to what degree can he and Jordan Clarkson play together. And in Luke Walton's mind, not much. He even admitted it. But I think with Lonzo Ball, the MO on him is he knows how to run the show. He knows how to get others involved, and that could make, as much as D'Angelo knows how to pass and he has the court vision, maybe that makes him more comfortable and playing off of it because his role more is to kind of read and react and to shoot. But that being said, that also gives the Lakers flexibility where if they're able to get in the Paul George sweepstakes now or before the trade deadline, they won't feel as hesitant in maybe attaching D'Angelo and or Clarkson as a part of a deal because they know, hey, look, we have a point guard that can run the show. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And I think the bigger question when we're talking about the backcourt, a potential backcourt with Lonzo Ball and D'Angelo Russell, is more on the defensive end. The Lakers did not fare well at all in that category last year, and I think both D'Angelo and Luke Walton would be pretty honest in saying that they wanted more out of D'Angelo and picking up that challenge, and it remains to be seen how good of a defender Lonzo will be. So it doesn't help that the Western Conference has all-stars basically at the point guard position on almost every team either.
Yeah, that's the big concern there. Absolutely. I mean, I am thrilled over the idea of Lonzo Ball and D'Angelo Russell operating in the same backcourt on the offensive end. I wrote a whole piece about it for LakersNation.com, and there's so many possibilities there. Either one of them can run the point with the other one off the ball. They're so interchangeable in a lot of ways, and the way Lonzo moves the ball around is so impressive, and it seems like it's exactly what this offense needs. But yeah, defensively, that could be a real mess, and that's going to be a struggle. It's something that they're definitely going to have to work on. Now, I don't know if you have a sense of this or not. I don't know if you saw this, but the other day on Twitter, and this is almost a little bit silly that we're referencing a tweet like this, but D'Angelo Russell liked a tweet, and because this is the social media era, everybody noticed it, but D'Angelo Russell liked a tweet. I'm paraphrasing it, but it basically said that D'Angelo Russell has been amazing, and the Lakers would be stupid to draft Lonzo Ball. Do you think there's a little bit of pushback there from D'Angelo Russell that he maybe doesn't want to share the point guard responsibilities with a guy like Lonzo, or was this just he accidentally clicked like on a tweet without reading the whole thing, or a mistake was made or something, or what's your take on that whole situation?
Yeah, I think this goes back to the psychoanalysis. Like, it's really hard for me unless I actually ask him directly.
Right. Yeah.
What your intentions were with that. It could be very well that he liked the support about what this fan had to say about him. But sure, I think it's fair to wonder, how does D'Angelo feel about a guy that could potentially take his spot and make the Lakers feel that he's more expendable. I'm sure just naturally as a human being that may lend itself to frustration. I think the broader point is and not to beat up on D'Angelo. This goes for any NBA athlete. Don't waste your time worrying about stuff on social media. There's a mute button for a reason because of things like that. And, I think in their defense, it's probably easier said than done. They're high-profile guys. They get all this stuff, both for better and for worse, lots of praise, lots of negative pushback. But I just know from talking to players over the years, especially veterans, they've grown to learn over time that there's really no point in just getting consumed with that, because it's just going to eat you alive, because it's always going to be fluctuating. There's always going to be people that feel like they have internet power because they can hide behind a screen name that has an egg icon on it,
keyboard curse.
Yeah, so it's almost pointless to try to wrap themselves. Now, that being said, when a player, even a veteran player, says they don't care what the public thinks, they don't read what's written about them, 90% of the time I find that to be false. It's just human nature. But it can't get to the point where they're so wrapped up into it and they're reading what people are writing or comments and then getting involved with it. I think there's a kind of a clear distinction to be made of, maybe monitoring what's being written about you, both from media members and what fans are saying, just to kind of get the pulse of the sentiment. And frankly, because you're human, you want to know what people are saying versus getting wrapped and consumed into it. So I think that's the broader point.
Yeah, we almost, you see this all the time online, but it's like we expect athletes to be absolutely perfect, and they're not, because they're human beings. There's so many of those, oh, well, he should be in the gym type comments.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
If you see an athlete anywhere, it's oh, well, he should be in the gym working on his jumper. He should be doing this or whatever. They're human beings, right? This is, sometimes we get a little overboard with social media and the 24-hour day access that we now have. As great of a thing as it is, sometimes it can be a bit much and can be a bit of a negative. Um, Speaking of which, let's talk about Lonzo Ball here for a minute. Um, Charles Barkley was on the Rich Eisen show recently, and he brought up this point. He basically said that what we're seeing happen with Lonzo Ball is that within a few minutes of any conversation, his dad gets brought up. LaVar Ball gets brought up into the conversation, and that the dad being so outspoken, it's actually taking away his son's opportunity to really step out and shine, and that the dad is doing the son a disservice. And so obviously he's a very polarizing person, and the conversation turned to, well, if the Lakers draft Lonzo Ball, how are they going to handle LaVar? And that's a topic that we've covered quite a bit. But Charles Barkley added this in, and he's friends with Magic Johnson, knows him. He said Magic Johnson is the guy to tell LaVar Ball to shut the hell up and get off our court. I thought that was interesting, that if anybody's going to shut down LaVar Ball, it's going to be Magic Johnson. And so do you get that sense from Magic at all, from having spoken to him and everything? Is he that type of personality where he would step in and prevent a guy like LaVar Ball from ever becoming an issue?
Well, it's an interesting question because when I've asked and others have asked Magic Johnson about this, and Rob Pelinka, they've really downplayed the father component. They've made it clear, hey, look, we're evaluating Lonzo Ball as who he is as a player, who he is as a person. We're evaluating his performances at UCLA. We're going to evaluate his workout whenever it is. We'll evaluate his interview. But that being said, there is no question, just knowing how the Lakers operate and just how NBA teams operate, they do research on all these guys. And so, you know, I know Luke Walton even said as much when he went on the Dan Patrick show a week or so ago, that of course they're going to look into, you know, talking to Steve Alford, the UCLA coach, and maybe others, of, you know, what exactly was LaVar Ball's involvement with the program? You know, to what degree was he able to, you know, stay away from the program and not, you know, make the coaching staff and the administration feel like he was undermining them? And I'm sure those are questions that they're getting answers to and will continue to get answers to. So I think with that being said, if I had to guess, you know, as far as how this plays out, I don't think the Lakers are going to be worried about, hey, LaVar, you can't speak to the media. You have to shut up. You can't promote your brand. I think the Lakers are embracing that. Like, this is LA. They're used to the soap opera. They like the branding. This is an LA kid. I think, if anything, they actually are in favor of that, and they want, you know, his dad and his son to feel empowered with that, look, we think you could be a star. But I think where they will draw the line in the sand is by saying, look, we're allowing you to promote yourself however you want, but do not get it to the point where you're doing interviews on an almost daily or weekly basis throughout the season about the state of the team, about the state of Lonzo's play, about the state of how he's being used under Luke Walton, on the state of how Lonzo's teammates are playing with him, because inevitably that's just going to open up, you know, possible criticisms on either the Lakers front office, Luke Walton or his staff, and Lonzo Ball's teammates. And I think that puts all parties in a pretty precarious position. And on top of that, you know, he had done some of those things maybe at UCLA where, you know, he had given an interview to my colleague Clay Fowler at the Southern California News Group where he was saying, you know, don't blame my son for UCLA falling short in the tournament. It's really hard to play with three white guys who don't have, you know, good foot speed. You can read between the lines who he's referring to there. Maybe he can get away with that at UCLA because Lonzo Ball is the guy on the team, but at least to open up his rookie season, he's not going to be the guy on the team. So that puts him in a pretty tough spot. So if I had to guess, the Lakers will do their due diligence and they'll differentiate between their sentiments of allowing LaVar to be LaVar, of being a self-promoter and that sort of thing, and seeking the spotlight versus, you know, kind of giving his first take analysis on all things Lakers throughout the year.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see how they handle it. It seems like publicly, pretty much everybody who's been asked about it has downplayed, like you said, whether it was the Lakers or not, has downplayed LaVar Ball and what his impact would be. But you have to wonder, privately, I'm sure they're looking into that kind of stuff, and it's definitely going to be a fine line to walk. Wherever Lonzo Ball ends up, it's going to be a fine line of self promotion versus saying things that are damaging to the team culture. I mean, we know that Lonzo Ball will probably have a little bit of a target on him. I mean, how hard is Steph Curry going to go after Lonzo the first time they play each other, right? Because of the dad's comments. So we know that that could become an issue, but I think you bring up a great point that there's definitely a positive side to this too. If this works, if the whole big baller brand thing works, then Los Angeles manages it appropriately, right? Magic Johnson proves that you can be a star in LA and make a lot of money being a star in LA, that means something more than being a star in another city. I think that just enhances the Lakers' allure to free agents and potential trade partners, right? So the flip side of this is that if they can manage this situation the right way and walk that very, very fine line, if they can do that successfully, then they could be better off in the long run because they've got a big personality like LaVar Ball to go around along with a talent like Lonzo. Am I being a little too optimistic there, or is that maybe
Yeah, I mean,
that
that's the best case scenario. And obviously the worst case scenario is, they do this research and, LaVar's saying all the right things. And then they realize, once he's actually on board that he goes back to, kind of he's the one running the show, and it's the Lakers that need to do everything for his son as opposed to the other way around. So, on top of that, I would add that, I can't imagine, I wouldn't be surprised that the Lakers say, look, like, LaVar, you're not going to be attending practices and, you're certainly not going to be in the locker room, but you're not going to be calling Luke Walton every week about your son's play and that sort of thing. And you're not going to be having, sit downs with Magic about everything. They'll run the organization as they see fit. So it'll be interesting. That's part of the whole due diligence that they have to do. The Lakers brass will have to get clarity and get honest answers of, all this evidence at play, and to give them a better sense of, based on the information we have in our instincts, is it more likely that the best case scenario happens, or is it more likely the worst case scenario happens? And right. It's really hard to know from an outsider's perspective because we're getting snapshots of it, but oftentimes it's kind of an incomplete picture. But that being said, I don't think the Lakers have made up their mind that Lonzo's the guy. Like they haven't even done workouts yet for the number 2 guys, and I know that. I think in the second week of June, they're definitely already going to bring De'Aaron Fox in for a workout, and I'm sure some other number 2 guys. So that's a huge component that they have to evaluate beyond the whole, LaVar Ball factor. It's, how do these guys look in workouts and what are they like in their interviews? Because specifically with Lonzo, they haven't talked with him yet because he wasn't at the pre-draft combine. So a lot of information they're still trying to get.
Right, we're still a few weeks out. We're a month out basically from the NBA draft, or 3 weeks or so. So it's going to be a little while till we really know. I mean, I guess we really won't know for sure until the name is called on draft day. But the Lakers are a long ways off from making a decision. They still have a lot of research to do at this point. Now, you did mention that they haven't done any draft workouts for the number 2 pick, but we have heard about them doing some draft workouts for guys that they could consider at the 28th pick, which they picked up from the Houston Rockets in the Lou Williams trade. And before we went on the air, you mentioned that you were at one of their recent workouts. Can you give us a little bit of an inside glimpse into what the draft workouts were like?
Yeah, frankly, I wish I could give you more because it's not like these workouts are open to the media. We catch maybe the last 5 minutes. And so I saw the workout on Memorial Day. It had some other guys like Bryce Alford from UCLA and Jordan Bell from Oregon and some other guys. And frankly, I can't really give you much insight on that because we literally saw them for 5 minutes shooting a few jump shots and running up and down the floor. and then they huddled up together. So like, can't really give you much there, but specifically with Bryce offered, it would be interesting. Would he and Lonzo Ball be a pair again, like with the Bruins? And the skill set that Bryce specifically offers, for better or for worse, is if he's going to be able to make some shots. And the Lakers could surely use some shooters on their end, especially if they're going to get Lonzo, because that will make him most effective. But at the same time, Bryce isn't really known as a defender, and obviously the Lakers are lacking there. So, the thing that's complicated with the 28th pick is that it's such a crapshoot, and you don't know to what degree, the impact they'll be able to get on a guy like that. But the Lakers' number one need is defense. So I wouldn't be surprised if they target some defensive guys. And, that's where someone like Jordan Bell could go into play from Oregon. Like he's kind of undersized, but he can play different positions. He's not known much as an offensive threat, but he's really known as a really good defender that can defend at different spots on the floor. And it's probably ambitious for him to say, when he was talking about how he wants to model his game after Draymond Green. Like, Draymond is one of the best in the NBA. But I think there is something to be said for a guy who kind of can fit that prototype in the sense that, he's not bound by position, and he can kind of help out in different ways. So if I had to guess, the Lakers will target someone that fits the mold defensively.
Yeah, in fact, I believe right now, and it changes all the time, but right now, NBADraft.net, one of several draft sites, has the Lakers selecting Jordan Bell with the 28th pick in their mock draft. I mean, it seems like he would be an interesting fit. You got to wonder where he would play behind Julius Randle, Larry Nance Jr., and of course Luol Deng can pick up minutes at the 4 as well. But just having that kind of defensive presence is certainly something the Lakers could use. I mean, we know last season they brought in David Nwaba halfway through, 3/4 of the way through the season, because they needed a defender. They needed somebody who could defend on the wing. And it's definitely going to be interesting to see what they do with that 28th pick. Now, we've also been hearing that some Lakers players have been getting in workouts after these draft workouts are over. So after the draft eligible players finish up, guys like Larry Nance Jr., Ivica Zubac have been coming in and getting in workouts. Did you get a chance to see any of that?
Well, at Memorial Day, Larry Nance Jr. and David Nwaba were there specifically. They watched some of the workouts, and then they were doing their own training sessions once those workouts were over. But I know that last week, a lot of the guys were in the gym. Basically almost every young guy on the team. D'Angelo Russell, Julius Randle, Jordan Clarkson, Brandon Ingram, Ivica Zubac, Larry Nance was there as well, Jr., David Nwaba, Tyler Ennis, I think Corey Brewer. He's a veteran, but he was also there. As far as all the question marks that enter next season and their consistency, I think it is an encouraging sign that the Lakers' young guys are coming in for these voluntary workouts, because it sends a clear signal that they're heeding what Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka told them, and they're trying to make that first step. And I think what's interesting specifically with Brandon Ingram is that he's already putting in a lot of things beyond just, hey, I'm going to be at the gym getting after it. Like, I talked with him last week for a few minutes. He was at some event for Delta Airlines where he was donating this mural that he had helped construct. And he was saying that he's working on the mechanics of his shot. Of course, he is bulking up in the weight room and that sort of thing. So it's not just guys getting after in the gym and playing some scrimmaging. It sounds like these guys are working on specific things that will help their game.
So is that different from, I don't remember, is that different from last summer or the summer before when Byron Scott was still around? Is that a change that we're seeing?
No,
or is this
really.
pretty standard?
The thing, this is more for baseball, but you always get amused when you enter spring training and guys say, hey, I lost so much weight, I'm in great shape, like I really got after in the off season. Like, that's kind of what you're supposed to do, right?
Right.
I know last year, I'm trying to remember the exact timing. So the season ended in mid-April because they didn't have a good year, and it was only a few weeks after that Larry Nance Jr. and Anthony Brown, who was with the Lakers at the time, they started coming in for informal workouts, and that kind of created a trickle-down effect where D'Angelo Russell and Julius Randle and Jordan Clarkson started coming in, and they became known as the Breakfast Club. And the reason why they came in early in the morning was a logistical thing. Like they have these workouts for these draft prospects in the mid-morning to early afternoon. So it was like if they wanted to get their workout in, they needed to get in there early. So this is, I don't want to say it's new. Like this is stuff that they have been doing before. And, you certainly want to give credit to Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka for their vision and what they're trying to do. But by no means was it an indictment of the previous front office or the previous training staff. Like they were getting guys in the gym as well. So it's just, this is what you do in the off season, but this is also a sense of, hey, it's good that it hasn't reversed course. Like they're keeping up the same idea of what they need to work on.
Yeah, I think the age-old, I guess, saying that you hear out of the offseason of the NBA is a guy reports to training camp and they say they've put on 10 to 15 pounds of muscle. Right? That's what I mean, that's just like the standard answer, it seems like.
Usually what you're supposed to do.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. You hear that just about as often as you hear free agent meetings went well, right? I mean, that's just the standard response. So
yeah, kind of on that note, if you don't mind me adding, like I know that Magic and Rob have emphasized, like, hey, the conditioning and losing the body fat, like in Tim DeFrancesco's defense, because I know he's not in the organization, he'd emphasize that all the time. So when we're talking about this is not a reflection of, the front office is bringing these new bold ideas. I think it's more of they're reiterating to these guys, look, this has been repeated to you before, and you didn't show enough of it, and you need to continue to show more of it. So that's where I think the focus should be on. Like, they're hiring, new guys on the training staff that are emphasizing this. They had emphasized it in the previous members of the staff as well.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense, and yeah, we'll have to see who really grows this offseason. In fact, before we get out of here, last time we had you on the show, we had you predict what would happen in the draft lottery, and you predicted that the Lakers would end up with a third pick, which wasn't very far off because they ended up with the second pick. I know I had Geeter McGee was on here, and he predicted the Lakers would get the first pick, so they landed right in the middle of what you guys said.
So if you combine Geeter's pick with my pick, it's always somewhere in the middle.
Right. So my question to you now is, and this is pure speculation, but who do you think of the Lakers' young players is going to make the biggest leap this offseason, and why?
It's a very good question. I think, if I had to guess, I think it's going to be Brandon Ingram, because we've already seen it. Again, his numbers didn't blow you out of the water, but when you look at who he was his first game of the season versus the 82nd game of the season, you saw tremendous growth in various facets of the game. That being said, I think all these guys are going to improve. D'Angelo Russell is going to improve. Julius Randle is going to improve. Jordan Clarkson is going to improve. Larry Nance is going to improve. Larry Nance Jr. is going to improve. Ivica Zubac is going to improve. But I think Brandon's going to improve the most because I don't get a sense that he's going to suddenly lose his starting spot. Like, it's his to keep. And it just seems like he feels and the Lakers feel that he's just getting started. He's just scratching the surface. And it doesn't sound like he's letting any stone unturned. So if I had to guess, he'll continue to improve the most. And I think that explains why, Magic is saying, hey, he's untouchable. That they really like where he's headed.
Right. Well, I had a feeling you were going to go with Ingram on that one, and I can't disagree. I mean, he's certainly an impressive talent, and we saw some really exciting things. I'm thrilled to be able to go check him out at Summer League in a couple of months here.
So what's your prediction? Who do you think is going to improve the most?
My prediction, I've been bouncing back and forth between Ingram and Zubac. And it seems like I flip-flop every day on it.
I think Zubac is going to improve as well because of just the confidence that he had last year. I talked with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar last week. He had written a book on John Wooden, and he had mentioned that he was planning to meet with Jeannie Buss and Magic Johnson a few weeks about a possible role. And I asked Kareem, I was like, I hate to maybe state the obvious, but I'll presume that might entail working with Zubac, right? And he's like, well, you can't rule it out. So I think if he works with Kareem and he's already working with Bill Burke on a sky hook, he's gonna continue to improve. But where I think Brandon has the edge when we're looking at this is it's not a foregone conclusion that Zubac will start next season to at least open up the year. I think Luke has kept it open-ended that maybe Timofey Mozgov will start again. Because of who he is as a veteran. He didn't obviously post amazing numbers last year, but he wasn't necessarily bad, and he mostly shut him down so they could develop Zubac, and the Lakers would never say this, but frankly, they were tanking to try to get a top pick. And I think with Brandon, it's different. I mean, obviously, they were starting him to develop him as well, but Luol Deng was just not producing. And I just don't see any scenario where Luol suddenly gets his spot at the 3 back because of that.
Yeah, I still believe, and I thought this heading to last season, that Deng is more of a 4 now than a 3 anyway.
I know that Luol, he said that he told me that he had said to Luke that he feels more comfortable playing at the 4, and that Luke agrees. The numbers show it, but here's what's complicated. Look at the other guys. It's Julius Randle, Larry Nance Jr.
Exactly.
It's not a foregone conclusion what the future is for Thomas Robinson. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent. Tarek Black has a non-guaranteed deal. But, if all those guys are back on, where does he fit? So it's really complicated to see, hey, we're going to play you at the 4 because there's so many other guys at that spot as well.
Right, yeah, it's not going to be easy for Luke Walton to figure out how to dole out all those minutes and how to get the most out of guys. I mean, really, if you want to get the most out of Luol Deng, you play him at the 4, but then you can't really cut into Julius Randle's minutes or Larry Nance Jr.'s minutes, so it's going to be quite a balancing act next season for Luke. One guy I do think we should definitely keep an eye on this offseason, as well as D'Angelo Russell. My general theory is that point guards tend to make the leap if they're going to in that 3rd year. So if he ends up playing point, or maybe he ends up playing off the ball alongside Lonzo Ball, I think he's going to be a guy who could jump up too. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm going back and forth between Ingram and Zubac, but you make a great point that Ingram will probably have more opportunity to really show that leap that he can make, or the improvements that he makes this summer. So that's a great point by you there, Mark. Before you get out of here, you're always providing just awesome content on the Lakers. Do you have anything coming up that you want to let everybody know about?
Not necessarily. I'm kind of more on, I'll let everyone know about it once it's published, that sort of thing. But yeah, we're just working. I'm just working on different, pre-draft coverage and that sort of things. And obviously, when the Lakers have workouts, I'll be there. So. They'll continue to have workouts. We're recording this on Tuesday. They'll have some workouts later today, and I'm sure it's only a matter of time before they bring Lonzo Ball and as I mentioned before, they're planning to bring De'Aaron Fox in. So as far as I'm working on, you'll see my draft coverage at the Orange County Register and LA Daily News websites. I do my own podcast, the We Want Tacos podcast every week, and I try to do some radio stuff with 570 and go on Spectrum Sportsnet and NBC4. So, I'm always working on stuff. And then, once other products are published, I guess you'll see them on my Twitter timeline.
Right. And if you want to follow Mark on Twitter, you can follow him at MarkG_Medina. Definitely a great follow, somebody to make sure that you are following if you want to keep up to date on all things Lakers. Mark, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate you coming on the show, as always.
Hey, thanks so much, Trevor, and I always appreciate you inviting me to go on your show. It's always a fun time.
All right, so that wraps things up with Mark Medina of the Southern California News Group. Again, make sure you go follow him on Twitter at @MarkG_Medina. As I said, great follow. Definitely one to make sure is on your Twitter timeline. Next time, we are going to break down a bit more of the NBA draft. We'll get more into some other possibilities for the Lakers. Might they look at Josh Jackson or De'Aaron Fox or maybe Jason Tatum? There's a number of different options, and we'll break down what that would look like if they did go that route. That's going to wrap things up for today. As always, you can follow us on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, the CLNS radio app, and of course, LakersNation.com. My name's Trevor Lane, and this has been the Lakers Nation Podcast.